So today we are doing lessons 20 through 22, which is the last three lessons of Unit 6. And so it's just combining like terms for all of those lessons. So we're going to see how we can tell that expressions are equivalent. And so we're going to determine why each statement is true. So the first statement, you have 5 plus 2 plus 3. And when you solve that, you get 5 plus 2 is 7. And 7 plus 3, and that equals 10. For right here, I have 2 plus 5, 3 is 5, and then bring down your plus 5, and that also equals to 10. So, that's true because no matter how you set it up, it's going to end up equaling 10. So that's also known as the associative property. So you're going to kind of learn about these properties or relearn. And so that tells us that, say, grouping differently with addition gives the same result. Okay, so the associative property says that grouping differently with addition would give you the same result, just like what we did. And so for right here, 9a is equivalent to 11a minus 2a. So you can kind of go about it two different routes. You can use the distributive property, which will tell you that you have to factor it out. So with the common factor that they have in common. So they both have an a in common, so you put that on the outside of the parentheses. And on the inside of the parentheses is whatever that a is multiplying by to get 11a. So 11 times a is 11a minus what times a equals 2a? Well, 2 times a equals 2a. And so 11 minus 2 will give you 9. And a is multiplying by whatever's in the parentheses. So if 9 is in my parentheses, then I'll end up having 9a. Or I could combine my like terms, meaning whatever terms are just like each other. So for example, if I have x plus x, that's 2x's, so that's 2x. This is kind of like a 1. If I have 2x or 2b plus 3b, basically combine those two together. So you actually add them, but you keep the b the same. So 2 plus 3 is 5, and then just keep your b. So 2b plus 3b equals 5b. Okay? So for number 3, 7a plus 4 minus 2a is equivalent to 7 plus negative 2a, 7a plus negative 2a plus 4. So that's the same because they just flipped it around. So subtraction can be written as adding the opposite so like adding a negative or whatever it is. So like, yeah, I'm adding the negative, so which is the opposite. And then the order can be switched with the commutative property. Okay. So basically just switched it around. So they switched it to where they could have the same terms together and then the different term by itself. So like I said, so if you could do 7a plus 4 minus 2a, which is the same thing as 7a plus 4 plus a negative 2a, but then they just switched this around to where you could go ahead and add common terms, like terms. Okay? So then for 4, you have 8a minus 8a minus 8. So if I end up solving this, remember I have to use my distributive property to basically help me out. So 8a minus 8a minus a negative, remember, it's the same thing as adding a positive. So I'm adding 8. So 8 minus 8 is 0, plus 8, you end up getting 8. Because 8a minus 8a, well, you're just basically doing a positive plus a negative of the same number, and that always equals 0, just like 8 minus 8 is 0. So, yeah. Okay. So now I have to look at 20.2. Diego and Jada are both trying to write an expression with fewer terms that is equivalent to 7a plus 5b minus 3a plus 4b. Jada thinks 10a plus 1b is equivalent to the original expression. Diego thinks 4a plus 9b is equivalent to the original expression. So number 1, we can show expressions are equivalent by writing out all the variables, which is a very long process, and explain why the expression on each row after the first row is equivalent to the expression on the row before it. So I'm going to write my answers for like here, right here, and so on and so forth. And so I have 7a's plus 5b's minus 3a's plus 4b's. So my first row, they wrote or write products as sums. So kind of like the distributive property. They just wrote it out. So for the next row, you have 4a's plus 3a's. So they kind of took this apart into 4 and 3. And you got the 5b's minus 3a's plus 4b's. So group first set of a's. Differently. So that would be your associative property. So now they kind of switched it to where the 3a's will end up subtracting the other 3a's. And then kept everything else in the same spot. So they switched the second and third groups of addends. I want you to know addends is like what's being added by each other. And that's the commutative property. And so now they actually subtracted that. So 3 minus 3 is nothing. So you end up with just these four A's right here. And then you bring down the other two groups. So you subtract basically this. Which equals 0. So this minus this equals 0. Okay, and then so for this one, they grouped all the B's together to add all the B's together, basically. And that's your associative property. So now you have 4 A's, and then you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 B's. So this is your final answer, which is 4A plus 4B. And they wrote, I guess you could say, wrote the product, sums as products. Write sums as products. So another way, it's what I think is easier route to go, but everybody's different. You have to explain, again, we're explaining what happened in each row. So for right here, that's the original, that's your original expression. Okay, but right here, what they did was they turned this into a plus negative, which is the same thing as just subtracting something. So wrote subtraction as addition. Okay. And then they just switched it, so they kind of lined up the A's and B's. So they grouped the A's and B's with each other. And then they basically combined them. So combine those groups together by either adding or subtracting, depending on what signs you have. Okay, so 7 plus negative 3 is 4, and you keep the A, and 5 plus 4 is 9, and you keep the B. So to see it better, I have 7A plus 5B minus 3A plus 4B. I can switch these two around to where it would look like this. And then I combine these two. So 7 plus negative 3 is 4A, and 5B plus 4B is 9B. And that's your answer. So now, I could practice that, or we could practice that, I should say, making the sides equal. So 6x plus what could equal to 10x? So first off, if you have a partner, you could do set A and the other person could do set B. You could even partner up with your parents and see if they can do some of these answers too. and just match them up with you. So 6x plus blank equals 10x. Well, 6x plus 4x is equal to 10x. 6x plus what equals 2x? Well, if I have a negative 4x, that's like saying 6x minus 4x equals to 2x. 6x plus what equals negative 10x? That would be negative 16x. That's like doing 6x minus 16x, which is equal to negative 10x. 6x plus what equals 0? Well, negative 6x, because you have to cancel it out. So 6x minus 6x is 0. And then 6x plus what equals 10? Well, I could do a parentheses expression of 10 minus 6x. So if I have 6x plus 10 minus 6x, you just write this out. And so 6x minus 6x equals 0. And then you're just left with 10. So 10 is your answer. So now for set B, so set B, you have 6x, I don't know why it's blurring out, minus blank equals 2x. Well, 6x minus 4x is 2x. 6x minus what equals 10x? Well, if I have a negative 4x, that'll be the same. So if I have 6x minus negative 4x, that's the same thing as 6x plus 4x. Okay? Which equals 10x. So 6x minus what equals x? Well, I could do 5x because 6 minus 5 equals 1. And so 1x is the same thing as just a regular x. 6x minus what equals 6? Well, I could do 6x plus 6. Totally wrote that wrong. No, I didn't. So 6x minus 6, because if I have 6x minus 6, this minus makes this a negative, and this makes this negative into a positive. So 6x minus 6x is 0, plus 6 will give you 6. And then 6x minus what equals 4x minus 10. Well, I'm going to have 2x plus 10. So again, if I have 6x minus 2x plus 10, this negative turns this 2x into a negative 2x minus 2x, and this negative turns this 10 into a negative. And so 6 minus 10 is negative 4. Well, we also need this right here as well. Totally meant to write that. X right there. Oh Lord, so 6x minus 2 is 4x. And then bring down your minus 10. There you go. Sorry, that's all over the place, guys. So moving on to lesson 21. We have to state all the statements, or select all the statements that are true, okay? So if I work this out, 3 plus 7 is 10, times 2 is 20, 4 minus 20 is negative 16. So all these are negative 16. So let me write that out for you. somewhere. So I have 4 minus 2 times 3 plus 7. So I solved it this way. I have 10, like that. 2 times 10 is 20. Bring that back down. 4 minus 20 is 16. And that's just how I solved it. So for this, I have 2 times 3 is 6. 2 times 7 is 14. And so 4 minus 6 is negative 2. Minus 14, that gives you negative 16. So this is true. So if I solve this, negative 2 times 3 is negative 6. Negative 2 times 7 is negative 14. Now bring down my plus signs and my 4. So 4 plus negative 6 is negative 2. And then negative 2 plus a negative 14. Whoops, that should be negative. Is a negative 16, which is the same thing as that. So that's true. So again, you do your multiplication before subtraction and addition. Remember your order of operations. So 2 times 3 is 6. Bring down your 4 minus. Plus 2 times 7 is 14. 4 minus 6 is negative 2. Plus 14 will end up giving you a positive 12. Because it's 14 subtracting the 2 and keeping the sign of the bigger number. So that's not true. So for right here, you have to do the parentheses first, but inside the parentheses, you have to multiply first. So you have 6 plus 14 inside those parentheses, which is 20. So 4 minus 20 is negative 16. So that one's true. So this one's almost like how we did right here. Kind of. Not really, but. So now, I have to look at 21.2, seeing everything differently. So some students are trying to write an expression with fewer terms that is equivalent to 8 minus 3 times 4 minus 9x. So I worked this out before I figured out who was correct and incorrect. So I'm going to kind of work it out right here. 8 minus 3 times 4 minus 9x. I have to distribute this to each of them because I can't combine these two because they're different terms. So negative 3 times 4 is negative 12. And negative 3 times a negative 9 is a positive 27, and keep your x with it. Because you can multiply by the x, so a regular number by a number with the x. However, you can't add or subtract a regular number by a number with an x. So 8 minus 12 is negative 4. And then bring down your plus 27x. In which turn, this is the same thing as 27x minus 4. That's the same equation. They're just moved around differently. So Noah says, I worked the problem from left to right and ended up with 20 minus 45x. Lynn says, I started the inside the parentheses and ended up with 23x. Jada says, I used the distributive property and ended up with 27x minus 4. So that's kind of like how we ended up with. And Andre says, I also used the distributive property, but ended up with negative 4 minus 27x. So do you agree with any of them? Hopefully, you agree with Jada. Because when we worked it out, I ended up with the same solution or expression. We can also plug in numbers. So like if I have, say my x equals, I don't know, 2. So if I plug that in to this, the original equation, so I put a 2 in place of that x, this is 9x, remember? So 9 times 2 is 18. 4 minus 18, so 18 minus 4 is 14, so that's negative 14. I have to multiply these two together, so that's a negative 14 times a negative 3, and that's going to end up being a positive. And so 4 times 3 is 12. 3 times 1 plus 1 is 4, so that's a positive 42. And I have to add it to 8, so that's going to end up being 50. So if I plugged it in this expression that we ended up with, so 27 times 2 minus 4, 27 times 2 is 14. 2 times 2 is 4, plus 1 is 5, and 54 minus 4 is 50. So you see that's the same answer. So for each strategy that you disagree with, find and describe the errors. So Noah, you could see that he subtracted before he multiplied. But you're supposed to do the multiplication before you subtract. Kind of like with order of operations. So Noah subtracted before multiplying. Lynn had combined the 4 and the 9 together, but you're not supposed to do that because X is with the X family and 4 is with the number family. That's kind of how I like to see it when I'm combining like terms. So Lynn combined 4 and 9x together, but you're not supposed to do that. So these are the errors, or basically what each of them did. So Andre had multiplied this by each other, but when he did, he kept the negative. He didn't follow his multiplication rule of a negative times a negative is a positive. So remember, a negative times a negative is a positive. Okay? Okay. So those were their 3 mistakes. So now I need to move on to 21.3. So grouping it differently. So where could you, basically the teacher says that there needs to be parentheses in there. So where could you put parentheses in the expression to make a new expression, but it has to be equivalent to the original? So there's about 2 of them, 2 different expressions that you could do. You could just put parentheses around the whole expression. Or you could put parentheses around the first part of the expression. Okay, so either one of those will work. So now we need to figure out where to put the parentheses to where the expression does not equal that expression. So I have, I could do this. Put parentheses around the 12x plus 5. Or, I'm just going to show you two different options, but there's like 5 options that you could possibly do. So I'm just going to show you about 2 different options. And so I'm going to actually solve these for you to show that these are equivalent and these are equivalent. And these two are equivalent to each other, but not to this. So this first equation, I have 8x minus 9 minus 12x plus 5. 8x minus 12x is negative 4x. Negative 9 plus a positive 5 is a negative 4. So that's what I end up with. So all these are in the parentheses, so I just solve it all in the parentheses. 8x minus 12x is negative 4x. And negative 9 plus 5 is negative 4. So that's the same as that. So when I do it like this, well, these basically, again, you can't combine like terms, so I just write it out. And so we end up doing the same thing as these. 8x minus 12x is negative 4x, and negative 9 plus 5 is negative 4. So for these, again, I can't combine these, but I can distribute this negative to each of them. So that's a negative 12x plus a negative 5. Bring down these two. So 8x minus 12x is negative 4x. Negative 9 plus a negative 5 is a negative 14. Notice how that's different from these up there. But right here, again, I can't combine these, but I can connect the negative to each of them. So that's negative 9 and a negative negative. A negative times a negative is a positive. Bring down the 12x. So bring down my 8x and my 5. So 8x plus 12x is 4x. I'm just kidding, 20x. Negative 9 plus 5 is negative 4. And see, that's also different. So now, we're moving on to lesson 22. So 22, you have to decide if they're equal to each other. That's to this expression. So I want to solve this expression first before I figure out these. So 6 plus 4 is 10. 8 minus 12 is negative 4. Negative 4 minus 10 is negative 14. Now I need y'all to go ahead and solve these to see if it's equal. Okay, so if you did that, for number 1, you should have gotten negative 6, because 8 minus 6 is 2, 2 minus 12 is negative 10, negative 10 plus 4 is negative 6, negative 14 for number 2, 8 minus 12 is negative 4, negative 4 minus 6 is negative 10, just kidding, positive 2, anyways, alright, so And then 6, -6, and -14. So 2 and 5 are equivalent to this expression. Okay? So now I have to determine if these expressions, which expressions are equivalent to each other. Okay? So I'm going to kind of do the first 3 rows with you, and then you can do the next 3 rows by yourself. So I have 9x plus 3x is 12x. So I'm going to write 9 plus x plus 3x plus 5y plus 7y. 5y plus 7y is 12y. 9x minus 3x is 6x. Not 5y minus, remember this is being distributed, so you have -7 at y plus 5y. That gives you a -2y. So you're subtracting 2y. And then 9x minus 3x is 6x. And so this is saying that you're going to add the 7y. So 5y plus 7y is 12y. Oops. Just want to make sure. So right here, I have to distribute this to each of them. So 12 times x is 12x, and 12 times y is 12y. So my first 4, out of these, 12x plus 12y, that's the same thing. So a and 1, I'm just going to kind of write it right here, are equivalent to each other. So I can start this off that it's already done. 12 times x is 12x, and 12 times -y is a -12y. And so I don't have those yet. And so 6 times x is 6x, and 6 times -2y is -12y. And I don't have those yet either. So now I need you to do the other 6 real quick before I reveal the answers. Okay, so you should have had something like that. So D is 12x. Let me rewrite that for you. 12x minus, geez, I can't write today. 12x minus 2y. And that matches with number 4. So 9x plus 3x is 12x. 5y minus 7y is -2y. So E matches with 2. So 9x plus 3x is 12x. -7y minus 5y is -12y. And then F matches 3. 9x minus 3x is 6x. -7y minus 5y is -12y. and 6 matches with B. 9x minus 3x is 6x. 5y minus 7y is negative 2y. So A and 1 go together, B and 6 go together, C and 5, D and 4, E and 2, F and 3. So now for our last few expressions, I'll do these with you. So I have to write each expression with fewer terms, meaning if you can solve it completely, solve it completely. Down to what you can't do no more. So 3 times 15 is 45. 4 times 15 is 60. Minus 5 times 15 is 75. 45 plus 60 is 105. Minus 75 gives you 30. I have to combine my like terms, so all these x's are just like each other, so I combine them. So 3x plus 4x is 7x, minus 5x gives you 2x. So now I have to use my distributive property for this one. So 3 times x is 3x, 3 times negative 2 is 6, or negative 6, plus 4 times x is 4x. 4 times negative 2 is negative 8. Minus 5 times x is 5x. 5 times negative 2 is negative 10. So my 3x plus 4x minus 5x equals 2x. My negative 6 plus negative 8 plus negative 10. Negative 6 plus negative 8 is negative 14. Plus a negative 10 is negative. I did that wrong, didn't I? Just kidding, this would be a plus sign because this negative gets distributed. So negative negative equals a positive. So that's a positive 10, so that needs to be a positive 10. Let me rewrite that. Negative 6 plus negative 8 plus 10. So negative 14 plus 10 equals negative 4. So my answer would be 2x minus 4. And so now, even teachers can mess up. So you have to be very careful with these signs. So now 3 times 5 halves x is 15 half x plus this times that equals 39 over 2. 4 times the first one is 20 over 2x. Notice I'm keeping it in the 2 denominators so that it'll be easier for whenever I have to combine terms. This is 52 over 2 minus 25 over 2. So 5 times 5 is 25, and then you keep the 2 right there. And then this you have to turn to an improper fraction, so 6 and 1/2 is the same thing as 13 halves. So multiply that by each item. Minus 65 over 2. So when I do that, 15 half x plus 20 half x plus 25 half x, or minus that, will give you 10 half plus x plus 26 over 2. And when I solve this, 10 divided by 2 is 5. 26 divided by 2 is 13. And that's my answer. So when you're done watching this video, you need to complete the practice problems from lessons 20, 21, and 22. And your unit test will be on Thursday, March 26th.